This is the second game in my series on the King's Gambit, attacking with the King's Gambit, hacking away with this most romantic of openings. In this game, we're going to take two players, again, maybe not two of the familiar players to everyone, familiar names anyway, but this game was another beautiful example of the King's Gambit in real fire on the board with the King's Gambit, a real great attacking game we're going to have a look at here. With the white side, we have Moswinski, and on the black side, we have San Losada. And again, this is quite important to us theoretically with our repertoire we're going to have a look at here, but also a beautiful game, a beautiful attacking game. And I'm going to give you some chances during this game to see if you can find the best moves as well. So as well as looking at King's Gambit, another lesson on attacking chess here. So the game actually started in a rather different move order to what we're going to be concentrating on. So the actual move order that we're picking with the King's Gambit is going to be f4, and now pawn takes f4, and knight to f3, g5. Can you remember the move you're supposed to play here? A lot of options. What do you play? Knight to c3, that's correct. You play this move here. A very useful move, this knight to c3 in the King's Gambit. The knight develops, and in some cases, it can come to the lovely d5 square. And now here, d6 is going to be the main position we're looking at. So this is where we're starting. And now h4 is the move we're going to first look at in this game. A very interesting and aggressive way to play. Now, the main idea behind this h4 move is after g4, which is really the only good way for black to cope with this. One thing black never wants to allow to happen is to, break up this pawn formation on g5 and f4 unless he has to. So this little push h4 can be a very interesting move. I mean, if black ever took on h4 with his pawn, then his pawn formation is quite disgusting here. And we don't even have to rush to recapture on h4. We could simply play in King's Gambit fashion. Hopefully from the first video, you remember one of the main things you should be aiming to do in the King's Gambit. Can you remember what that move was? There's a little hint I gave in the first video. Well, I think here, d4, controlling the center, and then we are going to eventually win this pawn on f4 back. With, we've got rook takes h4, bishop takes f4, and we can even castle queenside at some point. We've got a very promising King's Gambit position here. So as a general rule for black never really wants to break up these pawns unless you can win material and try to hang on to it. So in this game, we're going to look at the move g4 instead of this move. So after h4 here, g4, and now knight to g5. Now, what is the idea behind white's play? Well, quite simply, white is going for a quick win, even if he has to sacrifice material. Given a chance, white would love to go bishop c4 and again home in on the weak f7 square. Now, if he's not able to home in on this, he's just going to sacrifice his knight on f7. So knight takes f7, followed by bishop c4, d4, attacking moves is what we're going to look at, exactly as Moswinski played in this game. Now, before we have a look at this, I should also mention another interesting way that white can play after a move like d6. Now, this is pretty much the same against d6, knight c6, and bishop g7. And this other interesting way of playing is simply by playing d4. And this may well be one of the best moves in the position. But you have to, again, be willing to sacrifice it. The point behind this move is after g4, I'm simply going to sacrifice my knight on f3. I'm going to let you take my knight and aim for quick play. So I'm just going for quick development with this d4 move. I want to put my bishop on c4. When you go g4, I want to take on f4. I want to get castle quickly. And at the right moment, I want to play g3. Now, g3 is also a very important move to remember. I mean, against most of black's options, I'm going to play g3 in the position. But d4 is another very interesting way of playing here. I mean, for example, if g4 here, I'm just going to leave my knight on f3. I'm simply going to go bishop takes f4. And after you take on f3, queen takes f3. Even though we've given up a whole piece, we have good development. This is typical romantic King's Gambit stuff. Our bishop's going to come to c4. We're going to castle queenside. We're going to go for some really brilliant attacking moves here. But again, in the next game, the next video in this series, we will concentrate on this more. Now, if black doesn't play g4 here, let's say he plays bishop to g7 or some other move, then the main move that you should play as white is g3 here. I mean, this immediately tries to create some tension on the king side. But okay, again, next video we'll concentrate with this kind of idea. In this video, we're mainly concentrating on white playing h4 instead of d4. And then you can pick which one you prefer when you've seen both videos. Or you can just sit back and enjoy a great attacking game here. So this is what we're really looking at. Now, so the move order played in the game was slightly different to this. Our move order, as I just mentioned, is f4, black takes on f4, knight to f3, g5, knight to c3, and etc. like this. The move order played in the game was quite peculiar, and I wouldn't pay too much attention to it because it might just confuse you. I'm just going to bring it up now for my own uses, but it actually transposed to the similar position via a completely different move order with g5 here. But hopefully, you know what to do from the move order recommended. And here, white played this h4 idea. Now, g4 was played. There's not really another good way for black to keep his pawn formation on the king side intact here. And this is important. I mean, we looked at what happens if he takes on h4. I mean, what if he plays h6 here? Well, simply here, you can take on g5, and he can't be captured back because his rook drops. So he can't keep his pawn formation together like that. And if he plays f6, well, that's a pretty ugly move to play because black's taking away the f6 square for his knight. He's opening up this diagonal towards his king, and generally it just looks very ugly for black. I mean, you could simply develop with d4 and bishop c4, this kind of idea here. I mean, if you wanted to go a bit crazy here, you could maybe even play a move like knight to d4. The point being your queen wants to come into the attack on h5. But f6 just looks like a bad move to me. So g4 is really the move that is critical here. And now white's whole idea is to go knight g5. The pawn on h4 supports this knight jump to g5. So this is the main idea behind this. And now, well, there's a couple of moves here. h6 is what was played in the main game. This is going to be what we're mainly concentrating on in this position here. Now, what other moves can be tried here? Well, knight to c6 is pretty much similar. We just simply go d4, threatening to take on f4. And as soon as h6 is played, we take on f7. And after the king takes, we take on f4. And again, typical King's Gambit idea. We sacrifice a piece to open up the f file towards the king. Our bishop's going to come to c4 towards the king. We're going to quickly castle. We're going to just attack, 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 attack. I mean, imagine when you play the King's Gambit, I think you have to go back and you have to imagine when this immortal game was played, and these guys used to sit in the coffee shops. Imagine you're Morphy. You've got to get in the role of the King's Gambit player. Put on your Morphy hat and just imagine you're Morphy. Imagine you're there, you're sipping your coffee, you've got a big crowd around your game. You've got to play flamboyant moves. You're going for the attack. Your opponent's trying to defend, and if you win, you get these gold coins thrown on the board. You've got to get in the role when you play the King's Gambit. And I'd tell you, I mean, it's certainly one of the most interesting openings around. So that's pretty similar, but let's stick with the game because it's the same kind of thing in the game. Now, h6 was played by Sans Losada, and this is the computer's first move as well. And here white is pretty much committed to go forwards and to try to go for this 18th century attack. Knight takes f7, and now black has to take this piece, and instead of going bishop c4 check immediately, remember the threat, as Nimzovich said, is stronger than the execution in chess. So sometimes the threat of playing a move is much better, and here you just got to go for quick development. And d4 is always a move to play. We have a very bizarre position. Okay, white is a piece down, but the black king is clearly in a more dangerous position than the white king. White can aim to castle kingside or even queenside sometimes, and his bishops has lovely squares to develop to. c4 1, the other one taken on f4, attack, attack, attack. And here there's a number of options. The move played in the game was knight to f6. Now, I think the best move here, and a move that maybe puts a little bit of doubt on validity of white's opening is f3. And this is a good defensive move because it aims to keep the f-file closed. I mean, let's say white now takes on f3, well, okay, or bishop to e3. Black just tries to keep his pawn here so he can block the f-file. I mean, let's say after something like bishop e7, the computer actually gives here, g takes f3, and after bishop takes h4, king d2. And computer thinks black's a little bit better, but it's still a very dangerous position for black here. I mean, it's equal on material except for the one piece, so it's not equal on material, but equal on pawns, black is a piece up. But white's pieces seem to be coming in the game much quicker. Bishop to c4, queen coming to f1. You can even try pushing your f pawn. I mean, if something like bishop g5 here, then the f pawn starts rolling and you have this big barricade of pawns coming straight up the board. So even here in a practical game, I think white has very good practical chances. But okay, f3 is probably the best move here, but it's not the move that was played. I mean, other moves, let's say black tries to run with his king, makes sense. Well, here we can just develop, and this is what happens in the game, and capture things. And after something like bishop to e7, just queen d2, we can allow black to capture on g5, and now we can just castle quickly, develop our last piece, something like bishop c4, and then this offers white, again, very good attacking chances here. I mean, another thing in these type of positions, you also, I'll give you a little hint here, it's a very good thing to do, is to think about what your opponent's trying to achieve. Don't just think about your own attacking forcing moves. Remember to spend a little bit of time out to think about what how your opponent can finish his development. And in this type of structure, if he always has his knight, king and rook, barricaded in on the king side here, you're basically playing a rook up. And here, you have to ask yourself, well, how does black ever develop his knight on g8? And because, I mean, if he ever tries to move it somewhere, let's say he goes knight to e7. Now we can just simply take on g5 with a checkmate attack coming up. Rook takes h8 and the black's position collapses. So even though we're a piece down, it's very hard for black to finish his development. And this is where some of the compensation lies in the position. Now let's just go back and follow what happened in the game, because black did play the very natural move here, knight to f6. And now white simply took on f4 with his bishop. And later on, this f-file is going to be extremely good attacking line for us. I mean, one simple idea for white here is bishop c4 check and castles when the rook enters the fray. Now, knight to h5 was played by black. Black goes for a counterattack against white's pieces. Again, I think a better move here would have been king g7, but still here, white has great compensation. I'd recommend first you finish your development and maybe castle, and then you've got ideas of e5 coming in. This e5 move is a good idea, but why not finish your development first? Okay, well, knight to h5 was played, and now white brought his pieces into the game. Bishop to c4 check. Now, king to g7 was played here. What other options does black have? Well, if bishop e6, we simply take on e6 and take on g4 with check, which is going to be very good for white, so we can't allow that. If king to e8, we can just finish our developments. Something like queen d2, defending our bishop. And if knight takes bishop, queen takes. Queen e7, for example. Probably castling queen side's best here. And now, after a move like king to d8, we have got as many pieces developed as we can. So we finished our development. We need to think of the next stage of attack. Our opponent's king is stuck in the middle of the board. We want to open up lines in the middle. How do we do that? Maybe you can, at home, can think what the best move for white is here. e5, blasting open at the middle of the board and using our piece development, our extra development. A good hint there, if you've got extra, more development than your opponent and you're trying to attack, your opponent's well behind in development, then a great way to attack is by just blasting the position open. Try to look at pawn breaks that achieve that. So here, instead of king to e8, black chose king g7. But now white simply castled. And this shows us how powerful this knight g5 takes f7 idea can be. One main idea is to bring our rook to f7 with check. So a very powerful position here. Black tries queen takes h4, trying to start a counterattack. Very logical move. Now, a much better defensive move here would have been rook to h7. And this is actually a very clever defensive move. With the idea of the king going to h8. But still here, it's clear white has very good attacking play. Instead, queen to h4 was played. Queen takes h4. And now, white played a slight mistake here. White should have played the move queen to d3 here. And the idea of this is to stop g3 and queen to h2 check. And here, the queen is very good, because at some point when you play e5, the queen controls this diagonal. I mean, if g3 here, we have the lovely move bishop takes g3, leading to some fascinating positions. Maybe after knight takes g3, rook takes f7 check, king g6. Well, let's see what happens after the clever move rook to f3. Now black, again like the game before in the first series of video, can try to take a rook on a1. Can you, the viewer here, find the quickest way to checkmate black in this position? Obviously, it should be very strong here because the king is exposed. Pause the video now and see if you can find the quickest way to checkmate. Remember to calculate all the way to the end. Well, the quickest way here is with e5 check. For example, king to g5, we take on g3 with check. And now, after king to h5, we have something like bishop f7 check, king h4, queen to e4 check, with checkmate on the next move. So again, if black tries to get a bit too greedy in these positions, he's going to be in trouble. But queen to d3 was a better move than white played, but still, the way white played was also very difficult for black to deal with. So instead of queen to d3, and now bishop to e3 was played in the game. And I mean, this is very logical because the rook is making room to come down to f7. Now, knight to c6 is played here. I mean, a much better defensive move here would have been rook to g8, with a king coming back to h8. Even though white could have taken this rook on g8, black has to try to make the h8 square available for his king. And if if rook to h7 here, well, then white's going to win the bishop on f8 with something like rook to f7 check, and this bishop is in serious trouble. So black still had some defensive chances, but after his next move, knight to c6, the position quickly collapsed. White played rook to f7 check. If the king goes to g8, you have a discovered check with a rook, would be very strong. And after king g6, queen to f1 was played. A very nice move, trying to bring this queen into the game somewhere on the f-file, controlling the f-file. Another very strong move there would have been e5. Again, this comes back to the principle I said earlier. When you finish your developments and you're trying to attack your opponent's king, or if he's badly developed, you want to open up diagonals, open up lines. By playing e5, you open up this diagonal here. So that would have been a nice move. But queen to f1 was also good. Black in serious trouble here. Tried knight to g7, but now his position quickly collapsed after knight to d5. Again, energetic play. When you're playing the King's Gambit, you rarely go backwards. Try to go forwards all the time. And now bishop to e6, but after rook to f6 check, black had to try king to h7. I mean, a nice checkmate here would have been king to h5. Can you see the checkmate in two moves here? White to play and force checkmate in two moves. Pause the video if you need to. Knight to f4 check, king g5, rook to g6 mate. So the king tried to go to h7, but now white can get some of his material back. Rook takes h6 check, and he wins the queen, and he goes on to win the game, quite simply here. I'll show the rest of the moves just for, he's a queen up, and the black king is still in danger. And here, knight to f6 check, with the point that after he takes on e6 and throws another check in, he simply takes the rook on h8. And he's won another rook. The knight is on pre here, and black's position is crumbling. He's now too many points down. So I thought that was a very nice attacking game, showing some of the power of this h4 move. Let's just go over the opening very quickly. So that was with pawn takes f4, the critical g5 move, which we're concentrating on. And now I'm recommending against this, you go for double knight development. And after d6, which is played here, h4, trying to set up knight g5 and knight takes f7. In the next game, we're going to look at another option for white, which is set up with d4. And then you'll be thoroughly prepared against the move g5. And hopefully you've enjoyed some of these sort of... I'm trying to whet your appetite with the King's Gambit here with some of these very interesting openings and games.